Well, hello, everyone. I'm Louis Cardinal, and I am your host today, I guess you can say in so many ways. I'll be presenting today on reclaiming and reconnecting to Indigenous ceremony space in an urban center. So this is the story of kihcihkaw, askî sacred land right here in Edmonton. And I've been involved with this project since its inception, myself and Elder Will Campbell here from Edmonton as well. He and I presented the first paper on the concept of creating an urban Indigenous ceremony space for our people. So it's been a labor of love. We've learned a lot of things. We shared a lot of things, and really, in so many ways, it was a process in which it brings our community here in Edmonton a lot closer together. And for so long, our people in Edmonton, and I'm sure, and I'm absolutely sure across the country, that they also have to leave the cities in order to do their basic ceremonies. And so that's why this project, kihcihkaw askî, was so important for the city, but also kind of leading the way and just showing the rest of the country that this can be done. And it's a project that's long overdue, but it's also a project that's necessary. So I'll get started. So when we began this journey, a lot of things really had to come into place first before we actually began building the site and working on all the relationships it took in order for us to do this. So I'm going to go back to 1994 with the Edmonton Aboriginal Urban Affairs Committee. I'll be brief on this too, because there's lots of information here. I'm sure you can read all that. But the first thing that we did, I was chairing the Edmonton Aboriginal Urban Affairs Committee back in 2000. I think it was 2002, 2003. And this was a committee that was designed to make recommendations to the City of Edmonton for projects and initiatives, policies, that sort of thing for the City Council and its administration. At that time, when I was the chair, the only thing that we had in terms of support for the work we were doing was one person for 1 day a week. Was focused on doing the Indigenous work that we needed to get done, reports, meetings, all those sorts of things. So it was just one person once a week. And so that was problematic because our population is growing so fast. I mean, it just was growing and more need for integration and participation within the city and all the different sectors of our city was necessary. Our people were here. The numbers were not getting smaller. They were growing rapidly. So it was important that we started to look with the community at what our priorities and issues were. And one of those priorities and issues was a place where we can do ceremony, a place where we can pray. Because, we don't have a temple or mosque or a cathedral that we can easily go to do those sorts of things. So we needed something else. So working with the city over the course of a number of years, I had through the UAC committee, we developed a process called the Accord Relationship Agreement process. And we created a declaration in 2005 that the declaration of the City of Edmonton wanted to strengthen the relationship between Indigenous people and the urban Indigenous people in Edmonton. So the elders and the community members had pointed us in a direction. They said, what we need is that we need a relationship agreement with the city that sets a set of principles and values that we can adhere to and how we're going to have a relationship. Because it wasn't that we were going out and say we want to increase a job hiring with the city by 25% by this day or that day, or increase housing by this and that. We knew all those things were important, but what we felt was really even more important in order to have longevity in what we wanted to do is that we needed a relationship agreement. This is where the Accord came in 2007. is that it really set the foundation. So these two documents, the Declaration in 2005 and the Urban Accord Relationship Agreement in 2007, really became foundational documents that opened up the city to reassess their policies and be more inclusive of Indigenous people within the policy framework of the city itself. So that started the ball rolling. And from that, as you can see on the slide, all different kinds of memorandums and reports and ideas and concepts started to come forward. And so one of which was the kihcihkaw askî sacred land. And so it was by creating these relationships that really opened up the city to really be more understanding of what our needs are, and not, getting lost in the political issues of the day. But at least we created a space. We did a lot of education to city administration and leadership about who we are, what we need, and how we can work in relationships. So these things, if anyone in any part of this country really wants to take a better understanding of how to build these sorts of things, is that you need to create relationship, and you need to create a process that really helps support the things that you're going to do later on in the process, like the City of Edmonton's Indigenous framework, the Indigenous procurement framework. All kinds of different things came out of these relationship agreements that set the stage for what we could do. And so this specific project, kihcihkaw askî, is a joint initiative between the City of Edmonton and the Indigenous Knowledge and Wisdom Center. And the principles that we carried forward and what we wanted to do was peace, friendship, and respect. And those are the basic principles within our treaty traditions here in Canada. And so that's how we approached everything that we did, to carry that spirit. And the elders had pointed out when we were doing this that we need to follow those principles if we're going to build something sacred, or if we're going to work to build a sacred space for our people. Then we have to maintain that positive attitude and work hard to make sure the relationships are strong enough. Because, it did come at times where there were disagreements, there was pushback, there were misunderstandings. All those things are basic human happenings. I mean, that's just a part of who we are as human beings, is the emotional creatures that we are. So these principles help guide us. And of course, the use of ceremony, the use of talking circles, those sorts of things were really important in creating the framework for how we were going to move this forward. So this area that we built is it's an urban land base. It has about 11 acres, or 5.5, I think, hectares or something like that. And it is the first of a kind in Canada. And so we're getting a lot of inquiries from cities across Canada and how they can move forward with this as well. But an important component of this was making sure it was guided by the kihcihkaw askî Elders Council. But not only them. As we were moving forward and building this, we pulled in a number of Indigenous elders from across the province, and most certainly from this area around Edmonton, to help guide us to make sure that we're following the proper protocols and respect that was needed for it. So the site that we located, and I will show you some pictures in a little bit, is it is not far from the very center of the city. It's 6.5 kilometers. It's only 3.5 kilometers from the University of Alberta campus. It is just a couple hundred meters away from the North Saskatchewan River, and the White Mud Creek runs right alongside our property into the river itself. So the project itself was about $6.5 million to build it out, do all the landscaping and everything that was involved, and the city put the money forward for that. And so just a real quick overview. So as we move through this process, we identified what was called the Fox Family Farm. And it's a fairly large piece of land that they donated back to the City of Edmonton after the farmer and his wife had passed away. They wanted to give it back to the city because it was right in this beautiful White Mud Creek ravine nature preserve. And it was just a perfect site for us for many, many different reasons. So the Fox family donated it. The city actually took it over after the farmer and his wife had passed away, and the last one in 1982. And the city was just using it generally for some workshop space, keeping horses and various things for Fort Edmonton. So in 2006, we drafted the first proposal. 2015, the city provided $2 million in capital engagement and design to begin working with it. At that time, Native Counseling Services was moving forward with this project. Just shortly after 2006, we formed something called the Indigenous Elders Cultural Resource Circle Society. That was the not-for-profit organization we created. But we simply didn't have the capacity to do all the work that was needed. So we went to Native Counseling Services Alberta, which is a very well-established organization, not only in Edmonton, but across Alberta, and also highly respected and regarded across the country as well. So they took the project on, and they started to work on it. And they created the Elders Council. They went through the design processes in phases. And so then, as they reorganized back in 2017, I think it was, they then requested another organization to take the project on. So the Indigenous Knowledge and Wisdom Center, which was created by the Chiefs of Alberta for the development of curriculum and project and program development for all the First Nation schools in Alberta. But also we have relationships with other school systems as well. So they took the project on, and then they called me back into the project in 2000 to be the project manager with the strict orders of get it built. And so that's what we've done. So in 2001 in the fall, we got a ground blessing ceremony done, and the construction started just the following month after the fall solstice in 2021. And then in November 2022, the construction was done. And then in spring of 2023, we opened up softly so that we can kind of kick the tires and figure out how things were going to work and how things don't work. Because what you put on your plans oftentimes will change because the reality of operations and various things influence that. So expect that if you're gonna do something like this. And then this fall solstice, just a couple months ago, we had our official opening ceremonies and open house. So it was a great day. After 16 years of working and building and all that wonderful work, it finally got done. And so the co-design was with the city, but also with our Indigenous elders. It was really important for us to ensure that our cultural elders, our spiritual elders, the ceremony leaders were involved in assuring what should be done and how things should be done as well. So when it comes to operations, IKWC, my organization, will operate it. And we just signed a license agreement back in March. And the city is providing facility maintenance and groundkeeping and utilities. And we also have our responsibilities in there as well. And one of the cool things in this project is that we I guess you can say we were a test case for the Indigenous procurement strategy. And we did request Indigenous companies to offer their services. And so we went through a process in which we were involved in selecting the contractors that worked on the site. But we, I think at the end, we accomplished about 60% of the contractors were Indigenous. So it was wonderful to have that. So to be able to have our people begin that understanding the processes of submitting proposals and things for whatever project may be available in the city through their procurement processes. That was important. So here's a quick overview of where the location is for some of you who are not familiar with Edmonton, or some of you who have never been down here. This is on the south side of the North Saskatchewan River, and you can see that wonderful green ribbon up at the top over there. That's North Saskatchewan River. Fort Edmonton Park is a well-known place. That's where it's located, across the White Mud Drive. We're on this side, the southeast corner of that. And so kihcihkaw, as you've seen, that greened area is the land that we're using. And you can see the White Mud Creek just sneaking its way through. And Fox Drive is where you come into the site. So, while the site is centered on access to space and resources to do ceremony, it's also a place where families can access cultural resources at the heart of the city. A lot of land-based education is also starting to happen, and gatherings and commemorative events and ceremonial events, of course. But this is a place too where Edmontonians can learn about the traditions and the history of Indigenous people. As our commitment towards reconciliation, we've created many opportunities for those types of engagements to happen with just community people, just grassroots people, and the results have been just wonderful, very, very positive. And it's a place for our youth, our families that are in the city, to reestablish that relationship and connection to ceremony and land within the city, and of course being guided by Indigenous elders and knowledge keepers. And so it's again, like I said, there's a lot of natural land-based education and special gatherings, and I've gotten a lot of calls from a lot of cities. So long before it was farmland, we know that the site had been used by Indigenous people in the fort trade era. Oftentimes, Indigenous people would camp on that site before they prepared themselves to go into the fort or around the fort to do trading. So it was a known place. And what was one of the striking things that we found about this place is that there's right about 100 meters just directly east of where our land base is. There's a mineral called ochre. Well, it's actually called ferric oxide, rust for another word. But ochre is deposited, and that ochre, when it's dried, it becomes very crumbly and turns into a powdery dust. And you can mix pigments in with it, and you use it for paint and other ritualistic things. So it is very important, the ochre, particularly for Indigenous people in this area, but also Indigenous people in other areas as well. We have oral histories from the Piikani and the Siksika people in the south that recall during the fur trade era that they would stop on their way back home after trading at Fort Edmonton to pick up some of that ochre and bring it back home with them. And what's cool is that the spring that was depositing that ochre is still running to this day. And there's a huge ochre deposit there, a huge mineral tufa that must be at least maybe a couple hundred meters long, so it's significant. And now we're working with the city to protect the site so that we can have proper trails and protections for it. So it's very important for us as well. And so that site was an important site historically and culturally for us. And even the name White Mud. The white mud itself was used in a lot of our ceremonies and traditional activities and ceremonies. So white mud was important for us as well. And so we know, and the elders had made this very clear, when we did this project, we didn't just do it because we thought it was a good idea. We actually went first to a council of elders. We called together in 2000, I want to say 10. We called together an elders council, I guess you could say. Yeah, we identified 40 cultural, spiritual leaders in the Edmonton area to ask a question for clarity. Because if we received a rebuke from the elders saying, no, we don't want ceremonies in the city, then we wouldn't have moved forward. So this was a matter of process and protocol. So the question was, when we called out those 40 elders to come to this gathering for a couple of days, the primary question was, should we be having ceremonies in the city? The secondary question was, if so, what ceremonies? And then, of course, the other secondary question was, where should we have this? So they did have 2 days. They built a very strong consensus, because before that, the community was kind of split as to having ceremonies in the city or not. But they said, yes, we need to have ceremonies, because the elders pointed out that they said, well, because we see in the near future, most of our people will be in the urban centers. And that's true. Stats Canada points that out. Over 70% of Indigenous people no longer live in their traditional communities or their villages or their settlements. They actually are in the urban centers. So it is our responsibility now to ensure that this infrastructure, this cultural and ceremonial infrastructure, is there and available for the people. But when we called those 40 people together, I think it was 108 actually showed up. We don't know how that got out, but all across Alberta. So we had those 108 elders come and meet and add to the consensus. And so by taking their direction, they said, yes, we need to have ceremonies in here, but not like all the ceremonies. The sun dance, vision quests need to be done in a more natural environment out in the country. or in some of the Indigenous communities. And so we want to make sure we honor that and act as a conduit between the urban center here, and we can direct people out to various communities. So that was important distinction to have. And also they said, finally, to that third question is what it has to be. They said the site that you select has to be embraced by Mother Earth. They said we don't want to see sweat lodges in parking lots at Walmart or anything like that. It has to be as clean as possible. That means in a natural environment that hasn't been damaged too much by nature, and it's not too noisy. So the place that we selected, of course, was where kihcihkaw askî now is, and that's at Fox Farms. So within that consultation as well, just to be brief on this, is that we had two gatherings on May 6th and 7th in 2015, and we had about 70 elders come in and start to give their ideas and thoughts about what should be happening down there, what they would like to see. And then, of course, then we had two councils of elders meetings that were held in October 2015, and again November 14th and 16th. So being plugged into the elders community was really important for us to get this moving forward. But it was also an opportunity for the elders to really sit together and build that consensus and look in the same direction and all agreeing that this is what needs to be done. So it's a positive step towards how the community builds and maintains and fixes relationships. So it's a wonderful opportunity that way. And our Elders Council, which was created by Native Counseling Services of Alberta, which we still are using. They're still all here, with the exception of Ron Arkand, who had passed away. But it's chaired by Howard Mustis, Fred Campion, Will Campbell, Annabelle Kootenay, Beatrice Morin, Emil DeRocher, and Wilson Bearhead are still the council members for us at this time. And we will be working on revamping that to make sure that we'll need to have some more, but also we want to make sure it's a good reflection of our Indigenous community here. And so here's a quick overview of what the phase one looks like. And of course, there's a parking lot. We had to build this parking lot. We had to fix the road leading into the old Fox Farm site. And so we have an amphitheater, we have a storage building, we have a pavilion, we call the kihcihkaw askî Pavilion. We have a teepee or gathering circle, we have a sweat lodge circle, and these are the light circles that you see there. And then in phase two, which we're starting to talk about now already, we're anticipating building like a medicine garden and walkways, and also in phase three, we might collapse these two together, but creating a flexible area space for all kinds of different activities and ceremonies to take place. But here's an overview of the schematic of the building on your left is a combination of our storage building that you can see on the bottom part of it, and then the green part is the grassed amphitheater. So that's an amphitheater covering our storage space where we keep our teepee poles and pretty much everything, all of our tools. Even we have a little woodshed in there that we keep our wood high and dry. And then also then the pavilion off to the right, we have 3 washrooms. We have three barrier-free washrooms, and then we have 2 locker rooms with each 25 lockers in each room. And then we have our pavilion with seats 40. It's fire coded for 40. And then, so this is what it looks like in real life. So the project is completed. The work of programming it is starting to take place. And so we're learning all kinds of things, having a wonderful time. We have a number of different groups and organizations who are coming out here. In Edmonton alone, we have over 60 Indigenous organizations in Edmonton. And of course, each of them have their own ceremonial and cultural programming within their strategic plans. And so instead of having to go all the way out in the city to do a sweat lodge, pipe ceremony, or various other things, or even just meetings, we have this space here. So what you're looking at in these 2 pictures here is the kihcihkaw askî Pavilion. And you'll notice the copper color around it. There's also flagstones that have a similar color to this. But what it's representing, and we didn't know it at the time when the architects decided what color scheme they were going to, but actually they landed on a perfect selection, and that is the color spectrum of ochres from a yellow to a dark brown. So it just fits perfectly, because directly east is where that ochre site is. And so, and we're often out there showing it to people who come to visit us. So we signed our license agreement in March 2023. It's a 5-year agreement at this point. We're working on a longer relationship agreement as we speak, and also working towards having that land held in perpetuity for the specific reason of Indigenous ceremonies and cultural gatherings. So we're working on those longer term things as we move along. So when you go inside, here's a hallway. To the left are your locker rooms. To your right are your barrier-free washrooms. And all of our doors, with the exception of our utility room and a storage room, all the doors are operational by these bars that are on the wall. They open the doors. So if you have disability, or you're just having a hard time being able to open these doors, stuff, you have these buttons. You just push and it opens it up and closes it. And when you're in a washroom, there's another bar in there, that's a red bar, and you can push that and it locks it too. So all kind of high-tech sort of stuff. And as you can see, here's a quick look in the inside of the barrier-free washroom, and you see that bar to the right of the door. And this is the picture on the top. To your right is the one of the locker rooms. Just gives you a sense of size and what it looks like. Here is the kihcihkaw askî pavilion. We call this room the gathering room. And so we can sit 40 people in here. We have 10 of those tables that you can put 4 chairs around, so you can have 40. And we have 40 colors of chairs that have the primary colors that represent the region here. And so all of these tables and chairs can be configured to suit whatever need you have. And if you don't need them, they can all be pulled out and you can sit on the floor. This floor is heated by glycol, so it's nice and warm on your feet and your behind. And when we had our first pipe ceremony in there, we had 30 lawyers, believe it or not, all sitting in the circle with the pipe holder facing east. And that was the first pipe ceremony we had in there. The lighting, as you can see, has different colors in these circles. And if you look at the floor, it's just a series of circles. And all these symbols, give us a lot of information about our traditions, and our worldviews are shaped by the symbol of the circle in so many ways. But also with these lights, the way we have them designed, they represent the drums. Hand drums, healing drums, medicine drums of different nations. So it's a nice way of remembering these sorts of things. And of course, we have a super HVAC filter system at the top at the top center of this photograph there. I mean, it's a very powerful thing. So it gets too smoky for some people, you can always turn that on, and it cleans it out really fast. Or you can open the windows, and that helps too. So, so here's another angle on that. We have a 75-inch monitor there that you can hook up to any computer, or you can watch TV. We have Wi-Fi systems set up there, so we're ready for all kinds of different presentations. We have a counter there for food. We have a little bit of a storage space off to the left. But you're looking directly out onto the main part of the site itself. So it's really well lit, and there's a lot of room in there. It looks a little small here, but it's quite sizable. And here's our storage building. This door you're looking at is the woodshed, I call it. And then the other doors that are next to it, that's the tool shed. So we keep our golf cart in there, and also all of our tools. And then this space on your top right is where we keep our teepee poles. And this is where we keep all of our other materials, our teepee canvases, all kinds of different materials we're collecting now and building up a good inventory. So this is an overview of the sweat lodge area, which was really interesting because the importance of this. Let me see if there's a better picture. Yeah. So okay, let's go back here. So when we were testing building the sweat lodge fire enclosure and having a sweat lodge, it was 2 summers before we actually built this. And one day, an elder woman came down to the site and said she wanted to see the sweat lodge. She wanted to know if she can use it. And I said, well, sure, you can use it. Let me show you it. So when I brought her down there, she pointed out that what we had at that time was just a single sweat lodge with the door facing south and a fire enclosure with the only entrance, it was facing north. just directly opposite of the sweat lodge. And she said, I can't use this. And I said, well, why not? She said, well, first of all, you have one door on that fire enclosure that faces north. She said, my sweat lodge, the door of my lodge faces southwest. So I can't access and create that line that's needed from the inside of the sweat lodge to the door, to the mound that's in front sometimes, and then to the fire itself. That has to be in alignment. She goes, but my sweat lodge faces southwest, and I can't use this site. And then she gave me a little heck too, and she goes, and where's the women's fire? Well, leave that to men to decide, and we forget things. So I said, thank you, grandmother. I said, that's a really good thing. I said, we're going to change it, and we're going to do it right for you. And we did. So we came back with a design with the city. They accepted it. The fire department accepted it. So we have 2 fire enclosures with 8 doors, and you can see these 8 doors. So you can have your your sweat lodge door face whatever direction you need. So when you do ceremony, you can open your 2 doors to face whatever direction you need. So you have the male and the female fire that are there. And then here's the amphitheater, just to give you a sense of size and location, how close it is to the pavilion. And, when you go down there, if you haven't been, it's really nestled well into this ravine. So you can see these trees there. It's just really nice. And it's quite quiet, even though there's a little bit of hum from the traffic from the freeways that go by, but it's very minimal. A little bit more louder during the winter time because the leaves are gone, but when the leaves come out, it really soaks up that sound. And so we're also planting more trees out in the front to also create even more solitude and quiet in the area. And so when you look at this again, there you have the pavilion and you have the amphitheater. That amphitheater, I think, can fit about 150 people on it. We didn't want chairs and that sort of thing on there. We wanted people to be able to bring out their blankets, their pillows, or whatever they needed, and just to sit on the grass there. And it's wonderful. A great sound as well. It reflects sound very well. And then what we found when we were digging here is that we found this set of buffalo horns that is estimated to be about 3,000 to 5,000 years old. We went down to replace the old substructure, and then we uncovered these things that were there. So this was down about 2 meters or more, where we found these buffalo horns, and then we also found like buffalo teeth that are there, and other sorts of bones, and like a huge femur bone, I think that was, or thigh bone. And so we have those now being dated, and they're going to be preserved. The horns are going to be preserved, and we'll be having them returned in a proper container so that we can have them on display. And then, so here's a nice overview now. Now, you remember that other photograph that I showed you. So this is what it looks like now from an eagle eyes view. You can see the parking lot, you can see the sweat lodge circle, you can see the teepee circle / gathering circle, in the center of which is a feast fire pit. So we use that for many different reasons: sacred fires, gathering fires, storytelling fires. And so this is a large space, a large conglomeration of space. The field in front of it to the west is the area where the Fort Edmonton Park keeps their horses. So we're really fortunate that we have their horses there all the time. I mean, they're just good medicine, and they're just wonderful to have. And they're always curious when we have ceremonies. They always want to come and check and look over the fence and see what we're doing. and we have access to the site by public transit. So we have 2 bus stops at the top corner of that intersection. So people can come there and then walk in. We're trying to create a more direct route to the site, because you have to walk around that whole outer road, and that takes a while, especially if it's like winter. It's going to be cold. So we're creating things. We're seeing things we didn't see before when we were planning it. So it's kind of nice to have that flexibility to work through that. And so here's another angle looking south and east. You can see that on each of those buildings, we put in solar arrays. So all the energy we use for the structures come from the sun, and what we don't use, we send off to the grid. So you can see 2 little people in the center of that picture. It gives you a good scope as to what it looks like. And to the top right is the turnaround and drop-off zone. We have, it's great. Buses go in and out of there very easily. and you can just see a little bit of the creek, the White Mud Creek that goes through that. And then we had our fall opening ceremonies and open house this fall solstice in 2023. And what was exciting about that is that we had some Australian performers come to Edmonton by happenstance, and they had asked me if I had any activities or events they might share some of their culture, dances, and stories with. So I invited them to be a part of our opening ceremonies. And it was wonderful. So we had our traditional dancers, we had Métis jiggers, we had just a number of different performances. So we had 2 days. The first day was the opening ceremony part, where we had the pipe ceremonies, and we had speeches, the officials, and all that sort of thing. Then we had the open house day, the following day, which actually fell right on the solstice. And so we had about 600 people come through on that day, and so we packed the place for its first time. But just as a side note, because I want to get to some questions for you, there was a prophecy that we fulfilled. It was a short prophecy. I was on a talking tour in Australia in February of this year, at the beginning of this year. And I was in Melbourne, Australia. And I was asked to speak about kihcihkaw askî to an audience of city planners, architects, urban designers, and Indigenous representatives. Told them the story of kihcihkaw askî, and they're very pleased with it. And actually, they're starting to do work with Indigenous elders in building a ceremony site, a small one at first, but at least they got something going, and they were inspired by the work that we've done. But when I was done with that talk, one of the elders came to me and he said, I don't know why I brought ochre with me today, because something told me to carry ochre with me in my bag. So he showed me 2 pieces of ochre, and he said, I want you to have this ochre and take it back with you and place one of these with the ochre in that deposit that's close to your site. And he said, when you do that, you'll be creating a link to us, a storyline, if you will, to our people here. And he said, when you do that, you'll see that our people will come, celebrate, do ceremony with you when you do that. And lo and behold, this dance troupe was coming through Edmonton. I had known one of the leaders from before. And I said, well, guess what? We have room for you. And so in a way, even though the prophecy was 7 months old, we fulfilled the prophecy, and it was so great. And I still have that second piece in my office. And we've had Maori people come over now. We've had Indigenous people from South America there. So it's really has an international flavor to it as well. So it's been very fortunate, and I've been very pleased to be able to work with it. One of the things that we did when we did our ground blessing ceremony, and this is the last slide I have, is that when we did the ground blessing, we gave ribbons to everyone who was standing there. We all stood up and declared to Mother Earth, the Creator, and our ancestors, what our intentions were before we started digging around on the ground and moving things around. We had to explain to Mother Earth and the Creator what it is we were doing and what we saw for the future, and why kihcihkaw askî was important to our community in the city and to the city itself. So we all made those declarations, and we had tobacco as well. Everybody had. So they all stood up, held it in their left hand, and made their declarations known. And so that was a part of that process. It wasn't so much as we were blessing the ground as the ground was blessing us, so we can do the work we need to. So then when construction was done, we called together all of the contractors that were involved, the laborers, everybody who had something to do with the site, who spent time on the site building it. And so we called them together, and we gave them the same type of ribbons our leaders had used. And we also gave them a braid of sweetgrass to remind them and to thank them for the work that they'd done on the site. So each of these contractors, be it a laborer or an engineer, everyone got that gift, and we were in circle, and we sang songs to them, and we smudged them, and we blessed them, and we gave them thanks from the bottom of our heart. So that's a part of that relationship building that's critical, can never be understated. So that's the end of the visual presentation. And so I would like to I know we don't have a lot of time for questions, but certainly if we have any questions, I'm happy to take them. So I'll ask Celine if she'd give me a hand with that.
Yeah, no problem. From what I've seen, there's only one question. Just trying to track it down now. I believe it was from Adam. He was asking, how are you able to secure funding to support this project?
Okay, so the city, we had to go through the process of making those requests and so a part of that is that we have to explain our case and why we need the money and what we're trying to do. Fortunately, since with the inception of this idea, the city council and the mayors and subsequent mayors have supported this project all along. What I'm doing now is I'm now putting together the funding packages for staffing. So I need 4 staff, which includes my position, but I need 3 other staff members to run this site properly and the way that we envision it. But right now I'm doing everything. So we have different funding ways that we're trying to do. One of the issues that I have is that I don't want to take money away from the organizations in the city who need it. I don't want kihcihkaw askî to be competing for the limited amount of dollars that are in those funding envelopes for our organization. So we're making a direct political ask. We're asking for new money or found money. We're also pushing towards creating a funding envelope for this province for urban centers, Indigenous people organizations, and urban centers, either cities or towns, that can have startup money to do consultations and things should an urban center want to build ceremony grounds in their city. So that's one of the other things we're moving towards. But we're going to be making a political ask for new money to support us in this long run. So far, the responses have been positive.
I lost my mouse there for a second. Don't see any other questions, but yeah, I'm just curious because you've been in dialogue with other cities that have been, have been looking at this initiative. Has there been progress in those cities? Is this still
Oh yeah,
kind of the first in? Okay,
yeah.
cool.
We were invited to go and speak. Me and the city representatives were invited to go speak to a 2-day conference in Saskatoon. It was hosted by the Elders Council in Saskatoon, and this council called together a 2-day conference to discuss the building of ceremony land in Saskatoon. And so we went and presented to them our story and the things that we went through. So the land has already been identified, or potential sites have been identified. The city council supports this project for them, and so they're moving along quite well. And because we were the first ones kind of like put this together, each city is going to have their own unique process, but I think there's common elements that need to be a part of that process. And of course, community consultation, public consultation, Indigenous elders have to be central to that, because we're talking about ceremony and protocol. So and then Toronto is called Calgary. I'm going down to visit them. I've a couple of meetings with them already, so they're moving along. And Fort Saskatchewan, just next door to Edmonton here, they already have some land identified, and so they're starting to put that together. Toronto's called, Winnipeg's called. So we're getting there's interest, and so I think it's a timely thing too.